Hello everyone, this is Chase, and today I would like to describe to you the keys, controls, and ports located on the bookport DT, and show you how to power it on for the first time. As you might remember from my previous video unboxing the bookport DT, this is a larger version of the bookport Plus with some additional functionality, and as I said in the last video, it includes a mask that hides all of the more advanced controls that are included on the device, which makes it nice to use with students that don't want to use a lot of functions of the device, especially with younger students or elderly people who just want to play books and they don't really want to connect to the internet or change settings. So I have my bookport DT sitting on the table here in front of me, and I have the mask on because this is how you will see the unit when you take it out of the box for the first time. And I'm going to describe to you the keys that we can feel and see on the surface of the bookport DT when the mask is on, and then later we will go back and look at what's there when the mask is off. So when you orient your bookport DT, you'll make sure obviously that the buttons are facing up and that the speaker grill, or the rough surface with kind of lines etched into it, which is the speaker grill, is away from you on the right side of the device. Then you'll know that the bookport DT is in its proper operating position. Closest to you, you will feel a row of buttons. We'll talk about these from left to right, and remember that all of the buttons on the bookport DT are rubber. Furthest left, when the mask is on the row of buttons closest to you, you will find a button that kind of points to the left. This is your rewind key, or left arrow. You'll tap this to go to the previous title or option and hold it to rewind in audio. The button to the right of rewind is a large rectangle that is concave in the center. This is your play pause button. You press this to begin playing and press it again to pause. You can hold this button for a few seconds to open the built-in user's guide. To the right of the play pause key is a key that kind of points to the right, and this is your right arrow key, or fast forward key. It moves you to the next option, and if you hold it down, it will fast forward. To the right of these rewind, play, and fast forward keys, you find a small space and then two triangular shaped buttons. The one to the left with the point of the triangle pointing left is your previous title key. In a list of books, this will move you to the previous book or previous music file, etc. And the one right next to it with the point pointing to the right is your next title key, which moves you to the next title in a list. And finally, to the right of the previous and next title keys, you find a small rectangular button, and this is your record button, which allows you to make recordings, and if you hold it down, you can make a quick voice memo or a quick note. That is all on the bottom row. So now let's look above your record key. You'll find a large round button. This is your power key. You'll tap this to wake the unit up, or hold it down to put the unit to sleep or completely shut it off. And remember that, like the bookport Plus, if you don't need to shut the unit off, because if you don't shut it off and you just leave it on, after just a couple of minutes it goes into a sleep mode to preserve battery anyway. And when it goes into that sleep mode, you tap this button to wake it up. And in the center of this large round power button are some LEDs that indicate when the unit is on, when it's charging, and when it's recording. And finally, above the large power button, you will find a very small round button, and this is your sleep timer key. You can press this key a few different times to set different options for the sleep timer, like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, etc. This will control how long the unit plays before it stops reading. So if you fall asleep, it won't keep reading till the end of the book or file. It will just stop so you can resume reading close to where you fell asleep or left off. If you don't want this function to be activated but you've pressed the sleep timer button, you can keep pressing it, which will eventually cycle back to sleep timer off. Above the sleep timer key, you find your large circular speaker grill, as I said earlier. This is where your sound comes from, and the bookport DT does have a very nice, loud speaker. To the left of the speaker grill, you'll find two buttons, one on top of another. The top of this is your volume up key, which will turn up the volume. Closest to you is the volume down key. Pressing this will turn the volume down, and pressing these two buttons at the same time will reset the volume to its default level. And finally, to the left, this is at the top left of the surface of the device, you find two more buttons stacked on top of each other like the volume keys are, but these are your tone up and down keys. Pressing this top one will increase the tone or give you more treble. Pressing the down button will decrease the tone or give you more bass, which will allow you to adjust how well the sound is, how good of quality it is, and if you have any sort of hearing impairment, this will allow you to hear the sounds in such a way that it is easier for you to understand. And if you hold down these tone keys at the same time, just like with the volume key, pressing the tone up and down keys together will return your tone to the default level, which will make the sound just like it would normally without any tone modification. And that is all the controls that are visible when the mask is on the Bookport DT. Now, I showed this in our previous unboxing video, but I'll show this again. To remove the mask, you'll lift the front of the Bookport DT up. You will find on the left and right towards the front of the device 2 small tabs that you can kind of hook your fingers underneath. Pull these out to the side and lift up. You might want to press down on the Bookport just a bit to get the mask to pop off. And I'm going to set this over to the side. And now we see more controls visible on the Bookport DT. So let's just go through these quickly. Closest to you, the row of buttons is pretty much the same, except further left of the rewind key, you find a triangular key, which is your bookmark key. And when you're reading, you can press this to set a bookmark at your current position so that you can return there later. And then to the right of that, we have the buttons in the same order that I already described: rewind, play pause, fast forward, then previous title, next title, and then your record key. Above the bookmark key on the left edge or left side of the unit is a diamond-shaped button, and this is your go-to key. So you'll press this while playing any sort of book or file to go to a certain heading, a certain page number, or a certain percent of the way through that title. So if you want to do any sort of navigation, you will press this button. Above the go-to key is another diamond-shaped button. This is your title key, which when you press it will cycle between your internal memory, USB media, such as NLS cartridges or thumb drives, your SD card, and your voice memos. So to access more types of files that you have added to the unit that are not on its internal memory, you will want to repeatedly press this title key, or media button, as it is also referred to. And finally, above that title or media key is a kind of oval-shaped button, a long oval. This is your menu key, which you can press to get to many options which you can set for your device. And if you hold it down for about 5 seconds, you can get into a key describer mode where it will describe to you what keys you are pressing. Now to the right of the menu key, because we're now towards the top of the device, you find your tone up and down buttons that we talked about earlier. To the right of that is your volume up and down buttons. And to the right of that, however, we find a new control that was not visible when the mask was on. This is your speed up and down buttons. Pressing the top of this button will increase the speed of playback, make what you hear sound like it's going faster, and pressing the button towards you will turn down or decrease the speed, which will allow you to listen to something at a slower speed. And again, pressing the speed up and down buttons together will reset the speed to its default level. The speaker grill is, of course, in the same spot, and just below the left edge of the speaker grill, you find another oval button, long oval, but this one's kind of tilted, and this is your info key. When you press it, it will tell you things such as your battery status, how far you are into a certain file, if you're connected to a network, things like that, all types of information that you'll want to know. And if you hold this button down, you'll hear the current date and time. To the left of your info key is a telephone style keypad with 1, 2, 3 on the top row, 4, 5, 6 on the second row, 7, 8, 9 on the third row, and star 0 pound on the bottom row. However, the unit will call these cancel, 0, and enter. The 5 key, which does not have any current function, has a slight nib on it, as you would expect to find on a normal phone. These keys deal with moving through options and especially deal with different types of navigation, and we'll talk a lot about the uses of this telephone keypad when we go through playing specific types of books, because the functions of each button on the telephone keypad change depending on what type of title you are playing. So we'll look at the specific functions of these buttons more in depth when we get to playing certain types of titles. To the right of the info button, which is to the right of the telephone keypad, you find your sleep timer key. Below that, your power key. And then below that, of course, your record key, just like we said earlier. So that is all of the controls visible on the Bookport DT. Now let's look at the front of the unit, the edge that's normally facing you. And I'm lifting this up. You will find a large opening. And this is where you put your NLS cartridge for playback of books that you get in the mail from the National Library Service here in the US. It might be easier for you to insert a cartridge if you have the case inserted, because this is just a large opening in the bottom of the device. There's really nothing to guide the cartridge into place, but this is where your cartridge goes in. And furthest in to this slot, at the very back of the slot, is a USB port. This is also where you will plug in thumb drives, external hard drives, external CD drives for playing content from those devices. And the Bookport DT cannot connect to your computer via USB. So this USB port, it's a full-sized USB 2.0 port. It's only for connection of external media or an MLS cartridge. And that is on the bottom of the device, where normally it's sitting on the table. So your NLS cartridge will rest on the table. The right edge of the device does not contain anything. So let's now look at the back of the device, or the rear edge. From left to right, you will find your Ethernet port, which is where you connect an Ethernet cable. This is used to connect your Bookport DT to the internet. If you do not have wireless, you'll just plug an Ethernet cord like you would normally plug into a computer into this port. To the right of the Ethernet port is your AC charger port, where you plug in the charger of the Bookport DT to charge it. And finally, on the left edge of the device, we will find closest to you the full-sized SD card slot where you can insert SD cards, and these are the same type of SD cards that the Bookport Plus takes, as well as many other devices. This unit will take up to a 32 gigabyte SD card. And behind this, you'll find a 3.5 millimeter or 1/8 inch plug, which is indented into the unit, and that is where you will plug in headphones or external speakers. And behind that, you find another similar or identically shaped plug or port. That is where you plug in an external microphone or line-in cable. Now, before we end, the last thing I would like to show you is how to power on this device for the first time. To do this, you'll find that large round power button on the right side of the surface of the device. You'll hold this down for a few seconds, and you will hear,
"Please wait."
And you won't hear anything for a few seconds, as it's completely booting the operating system of the device from scratch. But after just a few seconds, you'll hear a musical tone, which will sound like, and this does take a few seconds. That means that it has started up. Now it's going to scan any media. So it'll start with the internal memory. If you have an SD card inserted or USB media, it will try to find any media on that, which means it's just going to scan.
Internal memory, text.
Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.txt.
It will try to find any books, music, podcasts, web radio stations, recordings, anything that it can play. It scans to find things that it knows how to play. And you hear Alice's Adventures in Wonderland because that is the file that it decided to put itself on. This is one of the many books and files that come with your Bookport DT on its few gigabytes of internal memory. You'll find a couple of books, you'll find a whole bunch of web radio stations, and you'll find a couple hundred podcasts that you can download. So the unit comes with many types of content that you can play right out of the box on its internal memory. Now, it doesn't always take that long to start up the Bookport. That is just when it's completely off. When you first get it, if you shut it completely off or if it's charging, normally you will either let it go to sleep on its own or hold down the power key for just a second or two to put it into power save mode, which will allow it to be woken up in just a second or two. So this is just how you power on for the first time right out of the box. That's all we have time for today, now that we've learned all of the controls and ports on our Bookport DT and we've learned how to turn it on for the first time. So that'll end this for today. We'll see you in about a week or two with some more training on the new Bookport Desktop or Bookport DT player from APH.